Hey guys, Mr. Ronan here. Welcome to another video. I'm going to try and be as energetic as I can in this video. I've been hearing a lot of complaints recently that I'm a little boring in these videos, so I'm going to try and spice it up a little bit here. Hopefully I do a better job at um, showing some excitement, all right? Because this is a cool unit, the circulatory system. It's pretty crazy. We don't realize that it's going on our entire lives, and it's never stopped over you sixth graders, your 11 and 12 years of life, and it's pretty wild. So, having said that, this video will talk about the circulatory system review guide that that I passed out on Friday. Some of you guys turned it in, so either way, this should look really familiar. And anything that I mentioned in this video, anything that's on this review guide, it'll be really beneficial for you to know come Tuesday. Wink, wink. So, having said that, let's just get started. So the first thing I asked you guys to do for me was to describe the purpose of the circulatory system and tell me why it's important. So again, last unit we talked about the digestive system, and then this is a different system of our body, the circulatory system. And the circulatory system is the system by which blood travels throughout our body, right? So the digestive system talked about how food traveled through our body and was broken down and turned into chyme, and how our body took those nutrients and released them to the bloodstream, and how the food that didn't get digested became waste. So, not the same thing with the circulatory system, although there are connections, and we'll bring those up as we go. But I want you to, what I'm looking for with this question, or with this, I guess with this number one, is the circulatory system. Circulatory system is the process, or is the system by which blood travels throughout our body. So what? Okay, big deal. Blood's traveling through our body. Why is that important? Okay, so you can understand what the circulatory system is, but I want to know why it's important. Why do we need the circulatory system to survive? Well, let's think about it. One thing, can you survive without breathing? Absolutely not. The reason you can't survive without breathing is because your body will not be able to take in oxygen if you're not inhaling, and it won't be able to get rid of carbon dioxide if we're not exhaling. If you remember from class, oxygen travels in our blood, carbon dioxide travels in our blood. So without blood traveling throughout our body, that oxygen and carbon dioxide would have nowhere to go, and that's bad news. So I'm gonna do some, I guess, bullet points, not bullet points, but little hyphens here. And I want you to know oxygen. That's one reason that the circulatory is so important. Oxygen travels throughout our body through our blood, as you remember. Remember, we'll get to that when we get to part 2, but remember, red blood cells are responsible for carrying oxygen through our body. Red blood cells are also responsible for carrying carbon dioxide through our body. Dioxide. Carbon dioxide, and this isn't necessarily good. Our carbon dioxide travels through our body so that it can be released or exhaled. And I also want you to remember nutrients. Nutrients travel in our blood. And if you remember going back to the digestive system unit, which really wasn't that long ago, once chyme enters our small intestine, the villi in our small intestine absorb the nutrients from that broken down food, that chyme, and it releases it into the bloodstream. So the way that nutrients get into our bloodstream is through the small intestine. The villi release those nutrients in there. So that's what I'm looking for this part right here, okay? So as long as you're comfortable with that, you'll be good to go if you were to see this question on the test. But all right, so I'm gonna see if this color, of course the color didn't go back to red. Awesome. So for the second part, I'm asking, what are the 4 parts of blood? And what is each part responsible for doing? So a lot of us, we do a fine job remembering what the 4 parts of our blood are, but we don't really necessarily remember what their responsibility is. Also, sometimes we get the parts of our blood confused with the different blood vessels. We're going to have to make that distinction. So when I say the 4 parts of our blood, I'm talking about the 4 components of our blood, 4 different parts. So one part would be red blood cells. And if you wanted to just write RBC, I understand what you mean by that acronym. Red blood cells. So one part of our blood would be red blood cells, and these are responsible or rather, yeah, these are responsible for carrying oxygen, nutrients, and carbon dioxide. Oh my goodness, this is going to be fun. And carbon dioxide throughout our body. Throughout our body. That's really all I'm looking for the red blood cells. So if you remember in class, we kind of have oxygen, nutrients, and carbon dioxide. Those are like hitchhikers. You know, they're standing outside the road with their thumbs up looking for a ride, and the red blood cells say, come on, hop on in. Hop on in. We'll take you where you need to go. That's sort of what's going on there. And if you remember specifically what's responsible for attaching the oxygen to the red blood cell, that's hemoglobin, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and write hemoglobin. You guys have a lot of fun saying that word, at least I do. Hemoglobin is responsible for attaching oxygen to the red blood cell. So if I were to ask you about hemoglobin on the test, wink, wink, this is what I'm looking for. Hemoglobin is responsible for attaching oxygen to the red blood cell. And I guess we could also mention, and it also gives blood the red color. So if you remember, if it weren't for the hemoglobin, our blood would actually be a yellow color. Because remember, plasma, one of the other parts of our blood, is yellow. And that would be kind of nasty, I think, if our blood was yellow. But, you know, it's whatever you make it. It's whatever your opinion is, I guess, on that one. So we have red blood cells. Now we're just going to stick with colors here. What's another color? Oh, white's another color. White blood cells. And again, if you wanted to just write WBC, I understand what that acronym means. White blood cells. And I'm going to go ahead and underline that W. And the reason I'm going to underline that W is because we're going to stay consistent here. Warriors. Remember, white blood cells are the warriors of our body. Okay, so anytime there are germs in our body or diseases or sicknesses or whatever, those white blood cells, they will go to war with those unknown visitors, those unwelcome guests that try to make their way into our body. These white blood cells, they go to war with it. And we're gonna elaborate on that once we get to down here to antibodies. But for now, just remember white blood cells, warriors. The warriors of our body. All right, so next we're gonna go to the next two are PLA words. So we'll go PLA, PLA. And I'm gonna start with platelets. Platelets. And if you remember, we talked about this in class. Some of the older generations, they'll say things like, fix a plate for me for dinner. So I told you, sometimes whenever my grandma would visit, and she would ask me to set her up for dinner, she would always say, Mr. Ronan. That's what she called me. She calls me Mr. Ronan. Not really. She calls my first name, but we won't get into that. She says, Mr. Ronan, can you fix me a plate for dinner? So I'm gonna go ahead and tie these words. Fix and plate. That's kind of a memory cue. I'm gonna figure out. You know what? I'm gonna put these in parentheses. Fix and plate. And the reason I want you to make the connection between these words, fix and plate, is one, plate is part of platelets, and fix. This is because platelets fix our wounds. And when I say that, I mean if we were to get a cut and maybe one of our blood vessels got ripped open, platelets will join together to block that cut in our blood vessel. That way, blood stops leaving our body, and it sort of buys our body time to make a scab. So don't be confused. When we have a scab, that's not platelets. Platelets are not the same things as scabs. Scabs are just dried up blood. Platelets are what close up the wound to stop blood from coming out. And we talked about this in class where if we didn't have platelets, I mean, we could die from just a simple cut. I mean, because how would we stop bleeding? But we wouldn't, you know? So, and there are some people who have low platelet counts, meaning their body doesn't make very much platelets. So very much or very many. I'll have to talk to Ms. Hoppert about that. My grammar is a little off today. So, anyways, doesn't make that many platelets. Let me retract. I'm sorry. I just feel like I wasted 15 seconds of your guys' time. Forgive me for that. So, people that don't make that many platelets, or their blood doesn't make that many platelets, if they get a little cut, sometimes that can be really bad news, and they have to take medicine because they won't make their blood won't clot, and it'll just keep coming and coming and coming. So that's bad news, and platelets are uh, extremely important for our survival. So what I want you to get is platelets fix our wounds. You know what? I'm gonna fix our wounds. I'm gonna go ahead and change that to um, platelets form good blood clots, because not all blood clots are good, but these ones are good. They stop blood from flowing out of our body. They keep the blood inside our body, which is important. Another PLA word, plasma. Plasma, all I really want you guys to focus on for plasma is this is the liquid part of our blood. So the reason this is important is because these platelets, white blood cells, and red blood cells, they would have a very hard time traveling throughout our body if it weren't for the liquid part of our blood. If you think about it like a lazy river, if you're just sitting on a tube in a lazy river, the reason you're able to move around is because of the water. If you take water out of the equation, you're just sitting on a tube, you're not moving anywhere. It's the same way with blood. The red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, they wouldn't be able to move around our body if it weren't for the liquid part of our blood, which is plasma. And plasma is about 90% water. It's mostly made up of water, so make sure we're drinking water throughout the day. That's where our blood gets water from. And what else do I want to talk about? And like I said, it's mostly yellow. If it weren't for the hemoglobin in our red blood cells, our blood would be yellow because of this plasma, because they call it plasma. So that's really what I just want you guys to know about the four parts of our blood and what each part is responsible for doing. They're not limited to just these things, of course, but these are the four key ones that or four key responsibilities that I thought was important for you guys to know. So let's just keep that in your heads. So what do blood vessels do? So sometimes people will call boats vessels, which is interesting. So that's just kind of random thought. Don't think that blood vessels are boats. Blood vessels. What do blood vessels do? This is where I'm just going to write a complete sentence. Blood vessels are where blood travels in our body. So when I was younger, I used to think that blood just flowed everywhere in our skin. There wasn't necessarily a path. It just hung out in our body and went wherever it wanted. That's not the case. Blood travels through veins and arteries and capillaries. In other words, blood travels through blood vessels. And I'm going to go ahead and write blood vessels are the roads by which blood travel. Okay, so if we're going to say that blood is a car, or we'll just go with the car. We'll say blood is a car. That means blood vessels are the roads or the highways in which they use to travel. Okay, so that's really all I need you to know for that. Name the 3 different blood vessels and what happens in each of them. Okay, so again, this is going to be important because some of us get the different blood vessels mixed up with the different parts of our blood. So let's key in on this real quick. So one type of blood vessel, this is driving me crazy how it keeps changing colors back to the black one. I want to keep it red. One blood vessel would be arteries. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to underline A. Underline A. In arteries, so arteries take blood away from the heart. And earlier, about a week ago, I uploaded a video which demonstrated this, which showed how arteries take blood away from the heart. You can go ahead and watch that if you would like to. It's about 12 minutes. I don't want to make this video too long, but if you feel like you need to go back and watch that, by all means, go ahead. But what I want you to know about arteries is that arteries take blood away from the heart. So if blood's going in the opposite direction away from the heart, likelihood is that it's an artery. So arteries take blood away from the heart. And the reason I underline the A's in arteries and away is because that would just be a nice memory cue. That's how I always remember that arteries take blood away from the heart, is because of those A's. All right, next we have arteries, then we have veins. So if arteries take blood away from the heart, veins bring blood towards the heart. Takes blood toward the heart. Okay, so anytime blood's making its way back to a heart, it's traveling through a vein. And this next one's a blood vessel that we all kind of struggle with a little bit. That's okay. It's kind of a tough word. I'm gonna go ahead and type it. Capillaries. Capillaries, tough one. Capillaries connect veins and arteries. So I'm gonna write these connect veins and arteries. So you'll never see, an artery will never directly touch a vein, okay? They're in between arteries and veins will be capillaries. And the reason capillaries are so important, I'm gonna go ahead and write, this is where gas exchange occurs. So the gases that are exchanged are oxygen and carbon dioxide. I'm gonna try and fix this. Oxygen, carbon dioxide. So remember, capillaries, they'll release oxygen to different parts of our body that need that oxygen. So for example, let's say you're running and your legs are just so tired and they just need oxygen. So you're going to be breathing heavy, you're going to breathe in hard. That's because your body's asking for oxygen, so that you breathe it in. And those capillaries will release that oxygen that's traveling in our blood. They'll release it to certain muscles and cells in our body that need that oxygen. In the process of doing that, though, there's an exchange. So the capillaries give oxygen to the body, and in return, the body's going to give those capillaries carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide's going to then travel into our through our arteries, and then it'll eventually make its way back to our lungs for us to breathe out that carbon dioxide. So there's a gas exchange, okay? So capillaries, there's a trade between oxygen and carbon dioxide. All right, so that's essentially all I'm asking you guys to know. I might throw a little curveball in there on the test. Just kidding. As you know, there will be no curveballs on any of my tests. You will not be thrown off by anything, and I'm not going to ask you something that I didn't bring up probably 10, 15 times in class, okay? So, just throwing that out there. We should all be ready. All right, so for number 5, again, I got to change the color. La-di-da. What is the lungs' role in the circulatory system? What do lungs bring in and release? So remember, two of the things that travel in our blood. So two, I'll just write gases. Gases that travel in our blood are oxygen and carbon dioxide. And the reason, or the way that oxygen, this is driving me crazy, guys. The way that oxygen enters our blood is by us breathing it in. Breathing it in, or inhaling. Okay, so that's how our blood gets oxygen. We breathe that oxygen in, and then our blood vessels will pick that oxygen up, and rather the hemoglobin in our red blood cells will snatch that oxygen and take it along for the ride. So that's how we get oxygen in our body. But we also, the lungs also play a role in getting rid of gas that our body doesn't want, like carbon dioxide. So I'm going to say the way that carbon dioxide carbon dioxide exits our body is by exhaling through our lungs. Okay, so this is kind of tying back into the respiratory system, which we have not gone over, but hopefully we're able to see these connections that the different systems within our body all work together. The digestive system, circulatory system in terms of getting nutrients in the blood, respiratory system in terms of getting oxygen inside our blood and carbon dioxide out of our body. So it's all our bodies working together to make things happen. All right, awesome. So the next thing I asked you guys was to tell me about antigens and explain why they're important. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to write. Change again. You know, I've had 5 questions to remember to do this, and I forget every time. Okay, so in quotations, I'm going to go ahead and write the name cards of our blood, or rather our red blood cells. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pull up a video in a second, so we'll come back to this. But I want you to remember that antigens are like the name cards of our name cards of our red blood cell, and antibodies are, we call these the swords of our white blood cell. All right, so I'm gonna pull up a video which does a great job demonstrating these things, and hopefully it's loud enough, but I'm gonna let this video go for about a minute or two. It's an awesome video.
It's often said that despite humanity's many conflicts, we all bleed the same blood. It's a nice thought, but not quite accurate. In fact, our blood comes in a few different varieties. Our red blood cells contain a protein called hemoglobin.
You knew that. Okay, I'm just sorry for interrupting. Here we go.
It binds to oxygen, allowing the cells to transport it throughout the body. But they also have another kind of complex protein on the outside of the cell membrane. These proteins, known as antigens, communicate with white blood cells, immune cells that protect against infection. Antigens serve as identifying markers, allowing the immune system to recognize your body's own cells without attacking them as foreign bodies. The 2 main kinds of antigens, A and B, determine your blood type. But how do we get 4 blood types from only 2 antigens? Well, the antigens are coded for by 3 different alleles, varieties of a particular gene. While the A and B alleles code for A and B antigens, the O allele codes for neither. And because we inherit 1 copy of each gene from each parent, every individual has 2 alleles determining blood type. When these happen to be different, one overrides the other, depending on their relative dominance. For blood types, the A and B alleles are both dominant, while O is recessive.
Okay, and then this video will start getting into more genes and genetics and alleles and stuff like that I don't want you to worry about just yet. But I did love that they mentioned that antigens help you identify your blood type. So antigens tell blood type. So for example, if your red blood cell has an antigen on it that says A, or that says A, that's going to communicate to your white blood cells not to attack it, because it's saying, hey, look, I am type A blood. Every other red blood cell in this body is type A blood. I'm not a stranger. I'm welcome here. Do not attack me. So that's what's going on here. And the white blood cells, they know what type of blood each person is. So for example, if white blood cells in your body, or can't talk today. The white blood cells in your body know that you're type A blood, and for some reason someone donates you type B blood, those antibodies in the white blood cell do not recognize that antigen. They've never seen B before. They know it's not welcome. so they go ahead and attack it. So the things that do the attacking on the white blood cells, those are called antibodies. So that's why I said they are the swords of our white blood cells. Okay, so if antibodies see an antigen on a red blood cell that they don't recognize, they're gonna go ahead and go to war with that antigen or that red blood cell. Okay, to make sure that um, only familiar antigens are welcome in your body. All right, so um, that's essentially all I need you to know about antigens and antibodies. Um, I might throw some different questions that we talked about in class on the test, but if you're comfortable with what we went through today, or in this video, um, which I hope we were, we'll be ready on Tuesday. But if there are any questions, make sure you write them down. Have them ready to go on Monday or even maybe Tuesday at the latest, so that we can go ahead and take care of what still needs work, what we still need practice with. Thank you guys for watching the video. Hope it was helpful, and yeah, have a great weekend. I'll talk to you guys on Monday. All right, bye.